Okay, John, we are at a minute after 2. If you want to go
Very
ahead and
good.
start talking about grilling and smoking and healthy cooking.
Thank you for coordinating this, Jonathan. It's so helpful, and it's good to see you all. And I'm glad to talk to you about grilling and smoking today. It's my favorite thing, and I have been doing this since I was a child, literally. I've always cooked outdoors, and some of the most memorable I've ever had have involved outdoor cooking through scouting and through camping, and so it's just a joy to me. And after I retired, my wife's goals were to clean her closet and buy a puppy, and my goals were to travel all over America in a camper and get serious about barbecue. So I have a system here where I use three different barbecue tools. I use this kamado, it's called. It's like a big green egg, only red. And that's my primary smoker. And then I grill on it as well. And I reconfigure it for grilling. And I have a small gas grill. So let's talk first about grilling, which is direct heat. Could you advance it, please, Jonathan? The biggest problem with grilling is flare up. The grease drips down into the fire and starts a fire there. And that smoke that comes off is terrible. It's really foul smoke, burning fat. And if you have a grill that's too small and you can't get your meat or fish or whatever you're grilling all out of there, then all of the product is going to be ruined because of that foul smelling smoke that comes from flare up. So if you can't get your meat product off to the side to a cooler place, you're going to burn everything up. And if you keep the meat in a closed box with that flare up smoke, it will really hurt things. And the longer that something is in that flare up, the worse it's going to taste. Till your barbecue will taste like a cigarette butt, literally. Another problem that we have with grilling is the temperature control around the dome. And you always hear them say, if you're looking, you're not cooking. If you raise the dome on your grill, whatever kind of grill you have, charcoal or gas, every time you raise that temperature, then you're not cooking. You are inducing too much air, burning too much air into the box, and you're going to get flare up. And then a problem with grilling is that you can very quickly go through your coals, and the temperature will fall off in your especially smaller ones. They don't have enough capacity. So temperature control for the long run is a big problem. And building a good fire. You can start a fire over in the corner, and then it races across all of the coals and burns itself out if you don't regulate the oxygen. So those are really things, difficult things to deal with, and you have to be patient. It takes 30 minutes sometimes to get your grill to the right temperature, and you're impatient and you want to get your product on to the gas plate. And so people have a tendency to rush and put their products on the grill when the grills aren't ready for them. So yeah, these are serious issues in every style of cooking, but especially with grilling. Go ahead. Let's go ahead to the next one, please, Jonathan. Now, I grill with this kamado. I'm going to call it a Sapphire grill because that's a brand name, but big green egg or any other manufacturers similar. Right over the coals, and you can see that there's a divider right down the middle of my firebox, and I can put the coals on one side and have it and have a cooler spot on the other side of the grill. And it just takes a smallest amount of coal. So that's really handy. I love my firebox because I can grill directly over it. And when there's a little bit of flare up, then I can just move the product off and have it in the hot box itself. So, but to do this, I need an even bed of glowing lump coal. I don't cook, I got a Kingsford shirt on, but I don't cook with briquettes rather. I use only lump coal. Burns hotter, burns faster, cleans up much, much easier, and is so fragrant and aromatic, and it's just so wonderful. Where lump coal has a tendency to have that aftertaste, and it's a big cleanup mess. So I always use lump. You maintain the temperature in these smokers and grills with the vents that are above and below, and you'll just have to learn your particular vents peculiarities. The bottom one is really critical, but they work in conjunction with one another. When we're doing grilling, we want to cook to the exact degree of doneness. It's so critical. You will have to understand what your guests prefer for doneness. And I'll talk about doneness as we talk about all the different things. There's a doneness that you want for pork. That is, all of these are safe temperatures. There's no food safety issue with these temperatures, but there's aesthetic differences. Pork that's pink, little pink and squishy is not appealing. We want it more firm, and we don't want any evidence that most people don't want any evidence of pinkness. Even the juice has to be clear. Really important. And with chicken, the same way. With turkey, the same way. And beef is just an individual priority. Some people just love nothing more than a medium rare hamburger. Some people can tolerate absolutely no pinkness whatsoever in their ground meat. So that's something that you're going to have to find out from your guests and learn them very well. I'll talk about temperatures. We really need to grill quality, tender poultry, fish, shellfish, beef. It has to be tender because it's not going to be cooked long enough to get tender. So tenderness and quality is really important in that area. Okay, go ahead. I like to start my coals with these fire starters by Royal Oak, and I use Royal Oak lump. There's no taste that I can discern, no aroma associated with it. They're wax, actually, I think. So when they burn, they don't impart any flavor at all, whereas some starters do. Now look at the two screens there. The one on the left is not ready to put your product in. The one on the right has that evident, obvious difference in the smoke. The barbecue pit masters call that one on the right sweet blue, and that's what you're looking for. If the smoke coming out of your grill, your lump coal or briquettes is cloudy and not aromatic, you're not ready. It can take 40 minutes, 30 or 40 minutes, depending on the weather and the wind and so forth, for that coal to shift the color of the smoke over to sweet blue. So don't rush it. You can tell by looking across the yard even if it is ready to go. Okay. This is barbecue chicken is my love, lifelong love. And I've never been very successful with it until I started using this technique. The skin is tough. The meat is dried out, or it's not done down in the bone. The flavor is not there, drenched in sweet barbecue sauce. That's just not what I want. What I want is smoky flavor of the meat, moist meat, tender and crispy skin. The skin is the hardest thing to get. So I found this technique. It's an ancient technique. It's centuries old, European, Scottish, I think. And this technique cooks the chicken and you get delicious moisture, flavor, crispy skin, and you cook a whole chicken. So I like this technique. Let me show you how I do it. Go ahead. You buy the smallest chicken you can get. They're hard to get. 3-pound chicken is a broiler, and they're impossible to get. They would cook very quickly. They're very young and tender birds. You never find them, except at the specialty markets. The free range people don't sell them either. They sell these big 5-pounders, but this technique works very well on the 5-pounders that we see in the store every day. Fresh, never been frozen. And I prefer to get ones that don't have any hormones, so free range. Now, you take the whole chicken, put it on the breast, legs down, and the keel bone the backbone up. The keel bone is on the bottom here, but they put the backbone up. Look inside, you can see the backbone. And then you take a strong pair of scissors and cut the backbone out. It takes a lot of courage to do that. You have to cut through the ribs, but a strong pair of scissors, you just go right down there, zip that backbone out and put it aside. Then press the chicken down literally to get it to flatten out. And once you got it flat like that, then you want to season it and lightly oil it, flip it over, season it and lightly oil it. And don't use a rub, or especially don't use a rub that has chicken sugar. We want just salt and pepper, and that'll be wonderfully flavorful. Okay, go ahead. So here it is. We've got the backbone out. We've got it on the other side. We've seasoned it. In this case, I use butter, but you can use oil just as well. And you will have less flare up and less burning with oil, but lightly oil it. And we're ready to go. We're ready to go out to the grill once the grill is ready to go. And so let's look at the next slide. Here it is. We have an even bed of coals. The dome temperature is 350 degrees. So it's just like an oven. And we are going to put that skin side down on that hot grate, and weight it down with a couple of bricks. I've lined the bricks there with aluminum foil, and hold the chicken flat, and it holds the skin down against the grate. It's cooking directly above the coals, and shut the lid. Now, we're not going to touch or look in there for 50 minutes. It's going to take a lot of courage for you to do this, but promise me, if your grill temperature, your dome temperature is 350 degrees and you had a good bed of coals, this is not going to burn. It's going to cook to marvelously brown and crispy skin. It's going to be really moist and nice too. At 50 minutes, then we can, at that point, we can take the bricks off and put them aside and flip the chicken over and get a little browning on the second side. You don't have to have it on there long, but you do. It's not very appealing looking until you get some browning on the rib side. Now, and with my particular grill, I can add wood chips at this point, and I do that every 15 minutes. I put some wood chips in there, which really is wonderful. I use cherry chips, and the flavor is wonderful from that. After it's been in there for an hour, the chips don't do any good on anything, because once the meat has started, meat, fish, poultry, once it has started to coagulate, it's not going to absorb any more smoke flavor. So I just do the wood chips. I add them every 15 minutes for the first hour, and then I'm done on almost everything: turkey, brisket, everything. There's no smoke coming off of that lump coal as they burn. So you've got to add chips to get smoke. Okay, Jonathan, thank you. So here it is on the second side. It's getting some browning on the side that was where the bricks were. And I'm looking for an internal temperature at the leg thigh. The leg thigh is where we always have doneness problems. So I want 160 degrees there on the leg thigh, 160 minimum. The breast will be a little bit ahead of that. But so what happens if I'm not there? What happens if it's not done? Well, you can just close the lid and just keep it going here and keep testing it if your fire is okay. But I don't use a lot of coal, and I don't keep it on the fire here. Once I've got the browning and the aroma, the smoke flavor, and the crispy skin, I take it inside and finish it in the oven where I can control the temperature, and I can put a probe in this chicken and get it done to the exact degree. So let me show you the next slide. I've taken it inside. I put it on with the skin side up, put the probe on that leg thigh, and you can see at the top I've got 154 there. And when it reaches 160, I am done. I will pull it out, let it rest, and hold it warm for a long time. And then once it's down to a temperature where I can handle it, I'll cut it. 8 cut, 2 legs, 2 thighs, 2 wings, and 2 boneless breasts. So perfect for a family of 4 with a 5-pound chicken. Okay, let's go to the next. Let's do a Kansas City strip steak, which is something that we don't have on our menu very often. I love strip steak. I think Kansas City strip steak is beef at its finest. It is a little tough for some. It is a little rich, too rich for some, too beefy. And since we don't eat a lot of it, it's kind of a shock to have a steak. Problem with these steaks is that there's so much individuality about them. I mean, there's so much personal preference, where one person is Jack Sprat and all of that, but the doneness of them is just something that's very difficult to pin down. I was a banquet chef, and I used to cook steaks for thousands of people. And if the room was dark, I could get away with medium rare for upscale crowds. But if I had anytime there was a table with a lot of sunlight on it, in some of the restaurants that I was on, I had to cook them to medium well, even for people, because the appearance was different than what they expected. But a medium is a debatable thing. Okay, well, I'm getting bogged down here. I like USDA choice, and there's upper tier of choice, such as Angus, certified Angus beef. I like dry aged, and I like to buy strip steaks in Manhattan cut. That piece of meat right there weighed 1 pound. And again, my wife and I share that. It's a 16-ounce Kansas City strip. You don't normally see them that thick. But getting them that thick means that I can maintain the right temperature. She likes hers about medium well, and I like mine about medium. So I can give her the temperature that she likes. So, and I only salt and pepper steaks. I grill them very hot. You can see how my grill is set up there with that lump coal roaring hot, 500. If I can get 600 degrees, I like that. And I want to talk to you now about what's going on with this. I don't have any flare up. You can see there's no flames coming up there. It's just heat. And it's intense heat. And what it does to the meat is it browns the meat, as opposed to the flames burning the fat and scorching the meat. So there's a big difference between meat that's been scorched with flames and meat that has been browned with heat, intense heat. So you have to look at whatever you're cooking. A hamburger that's on a grill that's right down on the fire, and that fire is burning up underneath it, and it turns that hamburger dark brown, or even black quickly. That's burned fat. That is not meat browning. So you really do have to watch what's developing there in your box. And with the lid down and that intense heat, it's cooking all around. It's browning on all sides. So it's very hard to keep the flare up down and the heat up. Okay, let's go to the next. Now, thin pieces of meat, even hotter, just opposite of what you would think. None of this low and slow stuff for meat that is going to be a chop or a steak, especially a thin steak. You want to hit that with the highest temperature you can, short of flare up. Now, the same way with fish. You don't want to put it on a low and slow fire. It's going to take up too much smoke. It's going to be very difficult for you to keep it from drying out. And so shrimp, fish, vegetables, fruit, high temperature, no flare up. Keep the box closed, and in minutes, your steak is browned, not charred. Your fish is has picked up the grill flavor and the color, nice coloring, and it will be still moist, so with high heat. And vegetables the same. As you're grilling vegetables, you just want a very, very light coat of oil on them, some seasoning, and put them down, get those grill marks on them and get them off of there. And fruit the same. Okay. So chops are tough. You've got the bone issue, whatever kind of chops. These are lamb. They're not big in diameter, but they're thick, and it's hard to get them done to where people like the temperature. I would say that a lamb chop ought to be at least 145 degrees on the bone. Certainly a pork chop, 145 on the bone. I use this very accurate Thermopin probe that is very fast and very accurate. And I want to see, you'll see it in a minute, and I want to see 145 degrees on that pork chop on the bone. The outside will be a little bit higher than that. And then it's surprising, after you do a chop, let's say a thick pork chop, you're going to want to let that sit for a long time, even to the point where when you put the back of your hand on that chop, you don't feel any heat. And if you let it rest that long, then the meat moisture is reabsorbed, and the meat is so much more moist and flavorful for that matter. If you cut it immediately, juices all run out, and it's not as good. That long rest for steaks, for chops, very, very important. And if you nail your medium, if you're looking for a medium on your steak, and you take it out and let it rest all the way down, 10 minutes or more, then that temperature will be set in that meat. If, on the other hand, you take the meat and you put it in a warming box before it's cooled down, it'll just keep right on cooking, and you will be disappointed at what used to be a medium rare steak or medium steak. It goes all the way to well done, just like that. Cool it down, long rest, and 145 degrees for pork. If you want some smoke flavor here, that's where you add your chips. And that's where you get that smoke, but you have to do it right at the beginning when you put them on, because after they've been on there for a while, they won't absorb any smoke flavor. Okay, go ahead. Now, wings are hard. My neighbor up the street says, oh, he only does them on a grill. And that's because he doesn't, it takes lots of turning, and he can get the skin tender while they're being done. But the skin is tender, the meat is correct and moist and so forth. They just don't pick up any flavor on a gas grill. If you have a nice rub on them, and if you use barbecue sauce, and they'll taste like a nicely seasoned and sauced wing, but they won't have any smoky flavor, which is what I want. So I don't think the gas grill works for me, and my gas grill is too small, and I can't take them off and put them aside on my small grill, and the flare up gets them. You can see there's lots of charred chicken there. That's not good. So I have gone to another technique for cooking wings, and I really recommend this. Go ahead, Jonathan, please. I cook them in this is just a wonderful method that I did not invent. I stole this like a pirate. I build a cone of coals in the middle of my smoker, my grill, and I get the dome temperature to 350 degrees. That's very important. I toss the chicken wings with a mixture of cornstarch and a poultry rub, and that really helps to crisp that skin. I put them around that in a wagon wheel, and I add smoke chips, the chips every 15 minutes, a couple of times during this cooking. 10 minutes on this side, flip them over, 10 minutes on that side, flip them over, 10 more minutes, and they are done. So 30 minutes for chicken wings, that's fast. And the flavor is marvelous. I'm going to give you a handout, by the way, with all of these things in detail. So I'm just racing through a bunch of techniques and a bunch of things to show you that my overall approach. But I promise you that a lot of details there on that. You want those chicken wings to hit up something above 160. They'll get to 180 in 30 minutes. So there'll be plenty done, and crisp skin and moist. And oh boy, are these luscious. Go ahead, Jonathan. And then I toss them lightly in sauce, not pour it over there, just toss them lightly, just get a little flavoring from that sauce. These are marvelous, marvelous, moist, crispy, and tender skin. Cook them in direct heat. We'll talk about that in a minute. And the skin will be very, very tough. And the chewiness of the skin is not good when you don't cook them over direct fire. This way does that skin so nicely. Okay, let's go ahead. Now, I thought I adopted this system in my camper. I was carrying a lot of cast iron, Dutch ovens and so forth. And when I wanted to do something like blacken fish on my gas grill, it would stick too much to the gas grill. I never could do it. So I just started putting a skillet in there and getting it to melt a horseshoe temperature, hot as I could get it, and use a little clarified butter in the bottom of the pan. It flared up, put the fish in there skin side down with a good, nice spicy rub. And in 2 or 3 minutes, it would brown like that, and flip it over, and it would be done in 2 or 3 more minutes. Those are pretty thick fillets, and cook so quickly. The smoke coming off of there would scare a fireman. You can't do this inside. Oh my gosh! But this really, really works. So I love this technique with this thing. And just a couple of weeks ago, I saw that the Kansas City Star had an article recommending putting a cast iron skillet on your gas grill and doing your hamburgers on there. And you say, wait, I want the hamburgers to have the flavor of being over the fire, right? Well, the fire isn't what gives them the flavor. In fact, the fire is the thing that is causing them to char. So this technique makes perfect sense. And if you want a little smoke flavor, then there are these little boxes that you put your chips in, put that right on the grill, and the aromatic chips flavor your hamburger. In the meantime, your hamburger stays moist. It browns beautifully. Browning is different than charring. And we used to call it charbroiled hamburger. No, that's not good. So anyway, this technique works with all kinds of things. Get that cast iron skillet just super hot, and nothing will stick to it. And cleanup could not be easier. All you have to do is, after you get your product out of there, is pour a couple of cups of water in there, and it'll start to boil, and you scrape up all of those things and dump that out somewhere where the raccoons can enjoy it, and wipe your cast iron skillet out and oil it and put it away. It's that easy. It's that easy. Okay. Shrimp on the Barbie. I tell you, don't make kebabs the old traditional way, the pineapple and the onions and the green peppers and all that stuff, because nothing will be done right. Nothing will be the right temperature. Grill the peppers, grill the onions separately, and pineapple, grill them all separately and get them to the perfect degree of doneness. Hold them warm, and then do your shrimp or meat kebabs or whatever you're doing, and then put them together on the platter rather than trying to do them on the sticks. Now, I use wooden skewers just for the look of it, but honestly, it's a whole lot better to use the metal skewers. If you're not going to present them, the metal skewers don't look good on a plate, and it kind of look like, I don't know, too medicinal or something to me. But they're nothing handier, and they just go in the dishwasher. So I love metal skewers if I'm not going to present them. These are very, very big shrimp. My son loves them, and I do not. They are tough. I don't care what exotic shrimp he brings me. The bigger they are, the tougher they are. And I'm sorry, I would rather have medium-sized shrimp than giant ones like these. But I humor him, and I use a little light garlic oil there, and it's a great feast. Pig out on shrimp. Go ahead. Okay, now let's do indirect cooking. I'm more than halfway through, and I'm gonna with time, and we haven't gotten near where I want to go. So indirect cooking. Now this is where the fire, in a huge big smoker, they're called indirect offset. They're called offset smokers, where the fire is over here and the meat is here, and it's just the smoke that's coming up. But in mine, and in this style, I'm right over the top of the coals, and I got to put something between the coals and the meat to give me indirect cooking so I can smoke. And so it almost always involves a water bath. The water bath is really important for indirect cooking because it keeps the fat from going down to the plate, the ceramic plate that's on top of the coals. If the fat drippings get onto that plate, it burns, and you've got a smelly fire of grease, and it will disflavor everything that you're doing. So you have to have a water bath. And when your water bath runs out of water, you're going to burn the fat that's in the bottom of the water bath. So you're going to watch the water bath, make sure you keep water in it. It's not about adding moisture to the firebox. There's plenty of moisture in the firebox from the meat that you're cooking. What you're trying to do is to control the fat, to keep it from burning and to keep it from going down on the coals and giving you a real messy cleanup. So that water bath is real important. Go ahead. Here's a pork loin, luscious. Lately, I've been doing pork loins high and fast, 350-degree dome, indirect. I've got water in that pan underneath that pork loin because there's a lot of fat coming off that pork loin, and I've got a probe in it. And in this particular case, I cooked it at 250. Just took a long, long time. Wasn't any better, just took a long time. So I cranked it now. I'm cooking pork loin at 350. I add wood chips every 15 minutes. You have to be careful. You can make it too smoky. It can be overwhelmingly smoky. Lighten up with the chips, maybe do it twice. The first 15 minutes, you put it on, the second 15 minutes, and then no more chips. If you do that all the way for an hour, you're going to get a very powerful smoke flavor, and you may not want that. So go gentle on that. And then a nice long rest at 15 minutes. If you cook it to 145, you will be moist, tender, juicy, flavorful. Oh, it's marvelous at 145. The pros will cook it to 141. It's not firm enough. It's the juice is faintly pink, but it's super, super tender. I say for 145 on pork for my family and my tastes. Go ahead. Smoked prime rib. Now people are shocked. John, would you really, truly go out and buy $20 a pound prime rib and put it on a smoker? Yes, I would. And I recommend it. It's luscious. It's wonderful. And I had 5 pounds of prime rib bone-in left over from Christmas in, I don't know, earlier this year, April or something, for a birthday party for my family. And I pulled out that prime rib and smoked it to medium rare. And I served it. I didn't have enough for the party got too big. So 5 pounds wasn't going to do it because, there's bone and all that fat and you just lose so much. But everybody got a piece of that. And I stretched the meal with the chicken wings. And actually my family liked the wings better than the prime rib. But the prime rib was luscious, and I got it done to the right degree of doneness that pleased everybody, and coleslaw and potato salad. So I thought that was a pretty memorable, casual meal for my family with a smoked prime rib. If you got any lying around, try it. And I cooked it at 250 to a 125 internal temperature. Again, it picked up all the smoke flavor it needed in the first hour, and then I could finish it in the oven at precise temperature with the probe in there and get it exactly to the internal temperature I wanted. So, okay, next one. Okay, ribs. There's so much to say about ribs. They are very, very difficult to do. I do a slab of ribs one time, and I think they're luscious. And the next time I'm disappointed. And it usually has to do with the doneness. There's nothing worse than fall off the bone done as far as tenderness, as far as I'm concerned. That's too done. It should stay on the bone. You should be able to bite it off. The tenderness is a very difficult thing to nail. The different kinds of ribs are daunting, because the St. Louis ribs are so huge. They've got that chain down the side of gristle that you have to trim off. And when you do trim it off and square them up, then they become St. Louis ribs. But spare ribs, are really rough and they need a lot of work, and you get that all that gristle, and bad for portioning and all that stuff. You got to peel these things. You got to peel ribs. It's hard to do. You grab that skin underneath the ribs with paper towel and you pull it off of there. It's tough to do that, but so important. Or you're serving a big piece of gristle with every single rib, and you don't want to do that. And also, it blocks the absorption of the flavoring and the rub and so forth. So Very important to peel the ribs before you go. Baby back ribs are very difficult to cook. They're not from a baby pig at all. Of course, they're from the same side. They're just from down lower to the belly, and they're thick. They're very meaty, and that's good, but it's dry and it's difficult to get it tender, and just very difficult. And nobody ever wins any competition with baby back ribs. It takes a full spare rib or St. Louis style to win a championship. There is this thing called a Texas crutch. So when I first started cooking ribs, they told me 3, 2, 1, 3 hours of smoke, 2 hours in a wrap or a Texas crutch, and 1 hour in a cooler sitting there steaming away and wrapped up in the cooler. That ruins the bark, the wonderful crust on the ribs. It makes the meat mushy. It's just not right. I'm smoking now at the most 2 hours, and then I don't wrap them. I put them in the oven and finish them in the oven at long and slow temperature till I get to the tenderness that I want. And I can tell that tenderness by sticking a paring knife between the two ribs. And I can tell you when it's tender to my preference with that paring knife. And it's not a temperature, it's a feel. So I do not use a Texas crutch or the wrap, because the meat becomes often too mushy. Okay, let's go to the next one there. Smoked turkey breast. There is an American crisis now involving turkey breast. You can't buy turkey. It went from a little over $2 a pound to $10 a pound here in the last couple of weeks, and you can't get it. And they think that it won't be available for the holidays, that there's one of those supply chain things. There are no turkeys. So, but they'll be back. They'll reestablish it, but it might not be until next year that they're able to do that. But a smoked turkey breast is a wonderful barbecue experience. It's economical. It's so delicious, smoked well, and it's certainly light. The skin is inedible on turkey. It's just, I don't care what you do. It's just going to be like decoration, and no one's going to eat it. If you serve it on a plate, it's all going to come back to you in the kitchen because it's just too tough and can't get it right. But it looks good. So, but you don't ever buy it with skin on because for that very reason, it's just leather. I do the same technique. I cook it low and slow. I don't brine anymore. You want to do that. You think it's going to enhance the moisture in the meat, but if you cook it low and slow to 160 degrees, it's going to be very moist, whether you brine it or not. And who needs the extra salt? So I don't brine. And I do have a very flavorful rub on the outside, and the combination of the smoke, the long, slow cooking, my turkey is pretty darn good. I think it's best with cherry chips, as I mentioned. I don't like mesquite. I don't like oak. I would use them if I had to, but cherry chips, if I can get them, it gives me the best flavor with poultry. Okay. Brisket is just impossible. It's just impossible. A Wagyu black grade whole brisket is 9 pounds, 10 pounds, $250 right now. And it is very difficult to cook it to the degree of tenderness and moisture that you want with the smoke ring and all that stuff. It's just so difficult, and it takes 2 days. You're going to be up with it all night long. You put it on mid-morning, and you are not going to be able to serve it. It won't be ready to serve until the next day. So very expensive, very difficult to do. There are two put 2 pieces to a brisket. There's the flat that we're all familiar with. You know, you get the corned beef, it's in the flat. And then there's the tip. I mean, it's a triangular shaped piece. It sits up on top. And back in the old days of Ollie Gates and those guys, as they were getting their restaurants started, they would cook the brisket with the tip still attached. And then it would burn and it would be charred and they would trim it off and they would just lay it on the counter and they were giving it away for a long, long time in all the early Kansas City barbecue places. Until finally somebody said, hey, you know, this, we should be making money on this. This is a wonderful cut, this tri-tip. And let's do burn ends, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But back to the flat that makes these beautiful slices. One thing I learned is that you put the brisket on the rack, fat side down. That's just counterintuitive. Everybody said, oh, no, you put it on top and the fat comes down. No, put it on the bottom and your presentation of each piece will be so much better looking. So the slices will look so much better if you cook it with the fat down and get rid of that fat thing there. There is a thing when you're cooking a big piece of beef, especially beef, called the stall. And that is the temperature, internal temperature does not climb smoothly from refrigerator temperature all the way to done. And by the way, done on a brisket flat is 195 internal. That's about right for tenderness. It doesn't climb from 40-degree refrigerator temperature up to 195 smoothly, evenly on any kind of predictable pattern. It hits a plateau, and for hours, it can be 3 hours. It sits at that stall, nothing happening. You keep checking your fire, what's going on. The stall is something that shocks everybody, and it really does screw up your timing and planning because you just don't know how long it's going to go from that stall temperature around 130 or so all the way up to 195. It's a long time of delay. That's a problem. Another problem is unless you have a much larger smoker than I have with a much larger fire pit, you're not going to be able to cook this thing for 7 or 8 or 10 hours without adding coal, and adding coal is very, very difficult to do. You've got the water bath to deal with, you've got the hot coals, you've got to get the coal started. It's very difficult to do. So I strongly recommend that your first attempts at brisket, you spend the first few hours in your smoker and then finish it in the oven, because you can precisely control it and you're not going to pick up any more flavor from the smoke box. So strongly recommend that you finish these things in your oven, and that'll let you go all night unattended. And the Texas crutch, which I discourage you from using in pork ribs, is crucial for brisket to get the brisket tender and still keep the brisket moist. Isn't dry brisket disappointing? So you want it moist, and yet you want it tender. And the only way to do that is to put it in a wrap and let it, with nice juices, honey, apple juice, those kinds of things that people do. The smoke ring now is really, it's important appearance-wise and everything, flavor. And I've read about the science of the smoke ring and what causes it. It's a reaction of the protein to the gases in the chamber. And my son describes it as carbon monoxide reacting with the protein. That doesn't sound too appetizing to me, but he says it's one of those gases that react and cause the meat to turn red. Doesn't add much flavor, but sure has great eye appeal, doesn't it? And we love it in our ribs. We love the smoke ring in our brisket, especially. Winning championships without a smoke ring. Okay, let's go to the next one there. Let's go to the next one, please, Jonathan. Pulled pork is the South Carolina thing, but also it's this pretty good substitute for carnitas. So I often use my pulled pork for tacos, and I'm not a big fan of that South Carolina pulled pork sandwich with the slaw in on top of the meat on the bun, and the sauce and all that. That's not my favorite sandwich. The Z-Man at Joe's, he's made famous with adding onion rings to that sandwich, I think. But I would rather have the slaw on the side, and I don't sauce my pulled pork. I put the sauce on the table and let people sauce their own sandwich. I don't want a big soupy thing. All of this luscious meat, and you see the different colors there. A pork butt has different colored meat. There's the dark meat and light meat, just like chicken. And so you get that, and you get the bark that's in there mixed up as a really wonderful flavorizing thing. This is a great dish, very economical, takes a long, long time. Let's do a pulled pork. Do a pork butt and talk about it. Go ahead. I love this Hormel, always tender, bone in, very economical, and it's a giant piece of meat. It's obscenely huge and wasteful, so much bone, so much fat that you're going to get half of the weight of this pork butt in smoked meat. So go ahead and do it. Do the whole thing, because it's so economical, and you don't have to bone it. You don't have to roll it or trim it or do anything to it. Just leave it like it is and cook it just like that, and it'll be fabulous. And I season it very heavily with a good sweet barbecue rub. Okay. And then when I put it on my fire, go ahead to the next one, please. I fill that smoke box. You see on the left, I got that smoke box full as I can get it, and it'll only burn about 5 hours. And then I'm off of the smoker and into the oven in the house at this point. It's 7 hours or more from the time you unwrap the package till the time that you can shred it and serve it. So 7 hours at least. Get it on early in the morning. You can serve it for dinner, but you're going to be hustling doing that. And the fire is going to die on you. In most smokers, you're not going to be able to go the full 7 hours there. But what we're looking for, the internal temperature on a pork butt is 195. You'll have to put the probe around different places so that you're not so that you're in the money muscle, in the meat, biggest, nicest muscle there, so that you can, you'll know that you get to that temperature, you can shred it nicely. It'll be tasty if you don't get up to that temperature, and safe certainly, but it will not shred. And that, to me, is your goal, is to get this meat tender enough to where it pulls apart. And so I do it in the oven. And it is a whole lot less effort and a whole lot more of a certain thing. And I'm not running out there. The water bath that's under there is going to boil and burn up, and you're going to be getting some bad flavors off of that burned pork. You're going to have to keep an eye on the firebox. It's just very, very much easier to finish these big hunks of meat in the oven, and sure is aromatic and wonderful in the house as your guests arrive and they get that aroma. Okay, next slide. So there it is. I don't use a wrap. You'll often see recipes. I don't use a wrap. I just catch all the fat in that aluminum foil. It wasn't sealed up in the Texas crutch. You just cook it to the right temperature, and you'll like the bark, and you'll melt the bark and wash the bark away if you put it in a wrap. Now you can see this, my firebox there, this after about 6 hours, the temperature dropped down to, room temperature in there because I ran out of coals. And this time I wanted to show you how much one, lump coal really is marvelous for cleanup because you get very little ash. So that's something, and the flavor couldn't be better. It's just that it burns fast, and unless you have a very, very big, an extra large big green egg, you're not going to be able to go 7 hours with your load of coal, and that's difficult. So, okay, that's pork butt. And here is the crowning jewel, I think, of Kansas City barbecue, and that's burnt ends. You'll see on the pit masters that they don't want any sweet on brisket. Texas style of brisket is just salt and pepper. It is no sweet. But also, so in Kansas City, they are taking the part of the brisket called the tip and cooking it till it's tender and cutting it into cubes and saucing it with a sauce, sweet. So here's the exception to the rule. If you gave one of those pit masters one of these burnt ends using the tip, they would totally approve. They just don't want the flat sweet. This is a very difficult piece to find. You'll never find it in a grocery store. You have to buy the whole brisket, split it out, put the flat in the freezer or something, and then do your tips. And a whole brisket won't fit in my smoker. So I don't do it very often. I have to curl it, and I just don't do this very often because it's so difficult to do a brisket. It takes so long, and it's so difficult to control the temperature for all that time. And you're gonna lose a lot of sleep doing a brisket. And if you do the tips separately, then you make that manageable. But if you go to Bicklemeyer's Grocery, which is on Cheyenne Street in Kansas City, Kansas, over by KU Med, kind of across the highway from KU Med. So on the west side of I-35, up there by KU Med, is Bicklemeyer's. And it is, if you need a specific cut or a specific species, or you need a goat smoked or a whole goat or a whole pig or something, go to Bicklemeyer's. They're wonderful. And if you want USDA dry aged beef or a special cut, or you want something like a beef tip so that you can do burn ends, Bicklemeyer's is the answer for you. They're wonderful. And don't forget them at the holiday season too. That's where I always get my prime rib. So burn ends are extremely challenging, and they're so rich. You just don't want a whole big bowl of these. I mean, you can only eat a few pieces. So that's why in most of the restaurants you see them served with something else to lighten the meal up, because you're going into a coma if you had 12 ounces of burn ends. I think it was overwhelming, powerful beef flavor. I think that's all I have time to cover. But if you'll go to the next slide, please, Jonathan, there is my email. And so please contact me with your questions and so forth. And I promise you a handout which details all of these things. I've had this smoker for 10 years, this Sapphire grill. It's just been my best friend out on my deck. I love it. It looks like new. It's just weathered so well, and it performs so well. Once I learned how to use it pretty well, and I journaled for 10 years. Every time I've done something different or new or found a new technique or something, I've journaled about it. It's 70 pages long, and it will take you through my learning process on all of these products. Every one of the pictures that you've seen in this presentation were taken that I cooked and put in my journal with a discussion about it, the temperatures, how to set the smoker up, things that I've learned the hard way by doing and by not doing well. That's that prime rib. And it was bone in. And it was tied. And so I put skewers there like this to keep it so it would stay up on the bones. But it shrank and the tie came off and the bones were still kind of attached, but they separated like that. So it fell over on the side. So I learned that, and I had never smoked at home. I've done this 100 times at work. I've always thrown, as a chef, I have always had a smoked prime rib for sandwiches and that sort of thing. It's kind of bar food, but I'd never done one at home, and so I learned a lot. My notes about that are in there, and I'm going to send that to Jonathan, and then I'll send it in a Word format or Pages or Word, and that way you can cut and paste from it. You can use the pictures for your journal and so forth. And then that's my last point: is keep track, because we only do a brisket once in a great while around here. We do a pork loin once every 2 or 3 months. I think I've done 2 this year, and here we are in August. I don't do a slab of ribs very often. I'm grilling all the time. Almost every week I'll grill a chop, or I'll grill a burger, or I'll grill a bratwurst or something. But smoking, a big smoking session, I probably only do that 2 or 3 times a month. And I do it year round. So the first picture I showed you was a ho, ho, ho on my barbecue at Christmas. So I do it year round. I just don't do a lot of big pieces of meat. And so I told you about Bickelmeyer's. I told you about the brisket fat side down, which is counterintuitive, and giving you my email. And please call, write, or text. I really enjoyed talking to you all. I hope I hit the mark of your level of interest. And if you have a barbecue guru in your family or a pit master, I love to talk to them. If you show them my slides, and if they say, what? I don't do that, I'd love to talk to them about how I came to the conclusion to do that particular thing, like 145 on a pork chop. So thank you.
Thank you, John. And we will post this video as well as soon as I get the document from John, I'll get that posted and give you a link for that.
Great. I thought next time I would talk about braising, soups, stews, and do some classics, coq au vin, and talk about braising, moist heat cooking, slow moist heat cooking, and so I hope I can pique your interest. We'll post the menu on the schedule of what's up for next time.
Sounds good. Thank you again, John. Have a good day, everyone.